Welcome to the complete story of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Traces of Two Pasts, a novel written by scenario writer Kazushige Nojima that gives us greater insight into the backstories of Tifa Lockheart and Aerith Gainsborough. In this video, we'll do our very best to summarize all the major plot points in the novel, even though there is of course no substitution for actually reading it yourself. Because who doesn't love the idea of reading a book to better understand a video game? You can judge for yourself whether I'm being sarcastic or totally heartfelt. You can take your pick. But the point remains that Final Fantasy VII Remake, Traces of Two Pasts has a lot to offer when it comes to taking our understanding of Final Fantasy VII to the next level. But anyway, I'm Peter from Birds of Play, and in this video I hope you'll join me for our retelling of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Traces of Two Pasts. The book is divided into three parts, the first one being about Tifa, and the second and third being about Aerith, not to mention all the people they meet along the way. So sit back and enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can become one of the people that we have met along the way, as we unravel the traces of these two pasts. Traces of Tifa. On the way from the grasslands to the Mithril mines, Tifa recounts her childhood at Aerith's behest, telling her and the others about how she was brought up in the small village of Nibelheim at the base of Mount Nibel, a small settlement that was put on the map when Shinra decided to build a reactor on the mountain. Back then, Tifa belonged to a group of kids who were affectionately known as the Four Fiends, on account of their many mischiefs. The group consisted of three boys: Emilio, Lester, Tyler, and herself. Yet there was another boy in town who seldom fraternized with the others, the boy being none other than Cloud Strife. Cloud had mostly come to keep his distance after an incident that occurred when Tifa was just 8 years old. At the time, Tifa's mother, Thea, had just succumbed to an illness, so Tifa, joined by Cloud, strove to climb Mount Nibel to see her mother's spirit in the land of the dead on the other side of the peak. As they attempted to scale the mountain's treacherous heights, Tifa slipped and hit her head, falling into a week-long coma. Cloud took the blame for the incident and was subsequently shunned by many in the village, although Tifa admits she has no memory of what actually happened. At 12 years old, Tifa was given a kitten named Fluffy by Xander, the head of the village, who had already cleared it with her father, Brian Lockheart, beforehand. Fluffy had a habit of running off into the village and end up on the slopes of the mountain. But thankfully, during Fluffy's first daring escape, she was brought back by Claudia Strife, Cloud's mother. Surprisingly, Cloud had been the one to rescue her, although he couldn't bring himself to return her to Tifa in person. In the months leading up to Tifa's 13th birthday, all four boys, including Cloud, were busy planning to enlist in the Shinra army or move to Midgar, bidding farewell to their backwater town. Emilio, Lester, and Tyler, who had long fought over Tifa's affections, hoping to return one day to sweep her off her feet. Being different from the other boys, Cloud asked Tifa to meet him at the water tower, and as she listened to him speak of the grand future waiting beyond the village, Tifa made him promise to come save her if she ever got into trouble. After their encounter under the starlit sky, Tifa realized that her complicated feelings for Cloud were a special kind of like, the one that ties up your heart, making you yearn to be with that person for the rest of your days. With the boys gone, Tifa's everyday life in the village took a sharp turn, and she began feeling somewhat abandoned, left behind as her friends enjoyed their own adventures in the big city. But some things never changed, such as Fluffy's habit of running off on her own. One day, while searching for Fluffy after yet another daring trip too far away from home, Tifa encountered a man by the name of Rashad Zangan training in the rushing waters of the Gunthra River. An impressive feat, considering the strong currents. Zangan, a wandering martial artist and self-help guru, had come to Nibelheim to teach a calisthenic class to the village, much like he had done in other places around the world. During the first session, Zangan took special note of Tifa, believing that the girl showed much promise. Tifa, however, was initially wary of the man, suspecting him to be a human trafficker due to his interest in her. Such suspicions were nevertheless short-lived, as she quickly came to regard him as a man of great character. Although Zangan's class was well received, Zangan's anti-Shinra rhetoric made him suspicious, and seeing as the village's prosperity was so reliant on the Shinra company, Xander asked him to leave to avoid any trouble. Before Zangan departed, however, he gave Tifa a copy of the first volume of his training manual, telling her to study it well and follow its instructions to a T. With Zangan gone, Tifa was asked to continue his calisthenic lessons in his place, as the village elders were eager to continue Zangan's exercises. Over the next few years, Zangan returned to Nibelheim periodically to provide feedback on Tifa's training and bestow her with additional volumes of his manual. He even recruited Tifa's father, Brian, to serve as her sparring partner. Tifa's relationship with her father having been much improved thanks to Zangan's positive influence on her life. A few months after Tifa's 15th birthday, monster activity around the Nibel reactor began to grow dramatically, and as a result, Shinra dispatched a platoon of soldier operatives to investigate the situation. While Tifa was searching for Fluffy yet again, an unnamed female member of the Turks saved her from monsters, although Tifa didn't recognize her as a Turk at the time. The woman was searching for someone who could act as a guide for the investigation team, and Tifa volunteered for the job. In the present, Tifa chooses to concur with Cloud's version of the Nibelheim incident, and refrains from divulging her own account of how the legendary soldier Sephiroth razed the town to the ground and left her for dead. In the aftermath of the incident, Zangan brought Tifa to a surgeon named Dr. Sheeran in Corel, who reconstructed her sternum, which had been pierced by Sephiroth. After her condition became stable, he then left her in the care of Dr. Damini Oranje, who ran a clinic in the Sector 8 slums of Midgar. There, Dr. Oranje performed a number of skin grafts and aided the rest of her recovery. Tifa woke up a month later, and Dr. Oranje informed her of the massive amount of debt she had accrued as a result of her injuries, not being able to waive the fee since it might get the clinic in trouble. She sets Tifa up with her son, Rakesh, who is another one of Zangan's students. To help her, Rakesh arranges a job with a man going by the name of Pops as a food cart operator. That way she can pay back her debt, little by little, even though it would take years. He also hooked her up with a tiny apartment built out of a shipping container, both the apartment and the job having been issued by Manson, the underworld boss who controlled Sector 8, who, according to Rakesh, expected Tifa to abide by his rules and stick to the job and accommodations he had allotted her. Despite the dire circumstances, Tifa managed to find some solace in working with Pops at Sector 8 steamed buns, by aiming to break personal bests for the number of buns sold in a day, each bun getting her closer to her goal. Tifa spent her days off practicing Zangan's forms and accumulated savings by living frugally. Shortly before her 16th birthday, Tifa managed to sell 1,003 buns in a day, the result of incredible discipline and determination. Tifa meets a woman named Marl, after the latter needs to go to Dr. Oranje's clinic for a skin graft. They hit it off, but lost touch after Marl's treatment was over. A chance encounter at the food cart then introduced Tifa to Biggs, Wedge, and Jessie, who became regular customers. Tifa became fast friends with Jessie in particular, who invited her to a planetology documentary screening for her 17th birthday. Planetologists believing in the existence of the life stream, and that Shinra was killing the planet by extracting it in the form of Mako energy. Such screenings were a regular occurrence, but after a terrorist bombing at the Corel reactor, Shinra blamed the terrorist group Avalanche and began cracking down on such activities even harder. One evening, Jessie arrived at Tifa's container injured, as Shinra was hunting Avalanche members. Tifa provided her shelter for the night, but afterwards, Jessie made herself scarce for Tifa's safety, despite Tifa wanting to help her. Later, during a Shinra raid on the slums, looking for Avalanche, Tifa's actions indirectly led to the death of a young Shinra trooper, and caused a small riot. She kicks him in the head when provoked, giving others the opportunity to attack him. On her 18th birthday, Tifa picked up a lead as to Jessie's whereabouts in Sector 7. Her search reunited her with Marl, who managed Stargazer Heights and the Seventh Heaven Bar with its proprietor Old Monty. The bar was Monty's life work as a cocktail aficionado, and he used the last of his savings to pay for its construction. Marl suggested that Tifa should work there as a waitress on her days off to help keep the bar afloat after the previous waitress quit, which forced them to reduce their hours. Marl also spreads the word that Tifa is looking for Jessie, since she is still adamant about helping her friend in need. Eager for this new opportunity, Tifa throws herself into the work, despite Rakesh warning her that Manson would not approve of her having a second job. Shortly after her debut at the bar, Monty fell ill, already having been in bad health. While working at the bar, Tifa met Barrett and Marlene Wallace for the first time, a father-daughter duo who had fallen on hard times. Barrett and Marlene had become regulars after Seventh Heaven's reopening, having been homeless since arriving in Midgar. Noticing their situation, Tifa confronted Barrett about the life he had been offering to the 2-year-old Marlene. Marl was moved by Tifa's empathy, and as a result, she convinced Monty to let the Wallaces stay in the bar's secret basement. Monty passes away shortly thereafter, and Barrett, Tifa, and Marl resolved to carry on his legacy with the bar. However, that was easier said than done, as the bar faced closure due to debts left over for its construction. Coming to the rescue at great cost to herself, Tifa offered up her life savings to pay off the down payment that threatened to foreclose the bar, putting her back in more debt, but the bar back in business. Tifa then learned that Jessie had set up a meeting with her through a coded message, and that Barrett was looking for Jessie because he wanted to join Avalanche, this being the reason he had been hanging around the area. During one of her shifts at the steaming bun cart, Pops tipped Tifa off to an upcoming large-scale Shinra raid on Avalanche, knowing she has been hanging around people associated with the terrorist group. This motivated Tifa to try to warn Avalanche through one of her contacts, since Jessie might be in danger. At the meeting place that was set up, Tifa was finally reunited with Jessie, but the location turned out to be a Shinra ambush. Coming to the rescue out of nowhere, Barrett dispatched the troops as he appeared with a massive gun attached to the stub of his right hand. He then took them back to Tifa's apartment, where he strong-armed his way into joining Jessie's Avalanche cell, proclaiming himself their new leader, as the way they had been doing things hadn't been working so far. On the day of the down payment for the bar, Tifa discovered, much to her dismay, that her savings had gone missing. Immediately suspecting who was at fault, she and Barrett paid a visit to Dr. Oranye's clinic, where they learned that Rakesh had stolen it to pay off his gambling debts to Manson. Damini had cooperated in her son's scheme to overcharge her patients to pay off his debts, trapping Tifa herself in debt in his place. Manson is revealed to be none other than Pops, who wanted to keep Tifa involved with his food cart, calling her the best business partner he had ever had, although he wasn't responsible for Rakesh taking advantage of her. Having sorted things with Manson, Barrett reclaimed Tifa's savings, and Dr. Aranye let Tifa leave with her medical debt forgiven. On the way out, as Rakesh begged Tifa's forgiveness, Tifa kicked Rakesh in the face in retaliation for years of gaslighting. Tifa finally free of his schemes. At the end of her tale, Red 13 is the only one still listening, that final kick having brought a satisfying conclusion to the story. However, Red 13 still wonders what became of Master Zangan, and asks Tifa what she would do if she ever met him again. Tifa tells him that she would show him her own style of fighting, Tifa having become confident in herself as a result of facing life's many hardships on her own. Traces of Aerith. While disguised as Shinra troopers on the passenger ferry from Junon to Costa del Sol, Tifa inquires about Aerith's childhood. Consequently, Aerith recounts her escape from the Shinra building and the trials and tribulations she faced growing up in the Sector 5 slums. Back at the Shinra building, Aerith and her mother Ifalna lived in quiet comfort as the captives of Professor Hojo's research department. However, when Aerith awakened to her powers as an ancient at the age of 7, Hojo became emboldened in his experiments on Ifalna, knowing he had a spare to fall back on if he ever went too far. Witnessing the cruelty, a lab assistant named Faz Hicks took pity on Ifalna and secretly provided her with painkillers to cope with the increasingly brutal treatment. Faz later aided Aerith and her mother in their escape by triggering a breach in the monster facility, smuggling them to the parking lot during the commotion. Faz had arranged for them to hide in a crate bound for the Sector 4 Undercity by train, where his associate would help them get to his apartment in Sector 3. Disregarding Faz's instructions, however, Ifalna headed toward a church in Sector 5, but her body gave in at the train station after all the abuse, causing her to collapse. As she begged someone to help her mother in her greatest hour of need, Aerith happened upon Elmira Gainsborough, and Ifalna used her last breath to beg Elmira to take care of her daughter in her place. Respecting Ifalna's dying wish, Elmira took Aerith to her house in the Sector 5 slums. The plot of land on which the house had been built had a special connection to the planet, causing flowers to bloom on their own. The house belonged to Elmira's father-in-law, Gabriel Gainsborough, an influential underworld boss who controlled Sector 5. She and her husband Clay had inherited it when Gabriel died, but Clay wasn't home at the moment. Clay had enlisted in the Shinra army to ward off discontent in the community over his family's privilege, and was currently away. On the first night in her new home, Ifalna's spirit appeared before Aerith to reassure her, continuing to watch over her in the days to come. Elmira introduced Aerith to Meguro, Gabriel's major domo, and he proposed that Elmira prominently showcase her adoption of Aerith around the town, with a false name, to provide her with neighborly protection from Shinra or kidnappers. However, while meeting one of Meguro's associates, Aerith accidentally introduces herself as Ronna, Ronna being the name of Meguro's daughter. The mistake spread through the Gainsborough organization hierarchy, and Aerith was forced to stick with it. A few days later, Aerith saw a vision of Clay's death, his final wish bringing his spirit to Elmira's home before he departed for the livestream. Aerith tried to console Elmira, but she remained in denial, unable to believe what the child was telling her. That night, Ifalna's spirit also returned to the planet, leaving Aerith all by herself. The next day, the official letter confirming Clay's death arrived, sending Elmira into a brief depression, as Aerith's words proved to be true. Elmira reaffirmed her commitment to taking care of Aerith, and introduced her as Ronna to the neighborhood, including the children of the local orphanage. One day, while paying his respects to Clay, Meguro brought his children, Marcellus and Ronna, to Elmira's home, Although Ronna was accepting of Aerith, Marcellus accused her of stealing his sister's name. Marcellus then revealed her real name to the orphans who would come by to play, and denigrated the orphanage, causing a fight to ensue. One of the older boys, who went by the name of X, roughed up Marcellus until Meguro broke up the fight. Meguro then chastised Marcellus for his unbecoming conduct. In the present, Tifa and Aerith realized that X changed his name to Biggs after he grew up and bought the Leaf House orphanage. He was nicknamed X because he arrived at the orphanage without a name. He and Aerith, having shared a connection, were having both gotten to choose their names. In those days, Clay's lieutenant Carlo Kincaid often helped out at the house. Clay lifted him out of poverty, and as a result, he became fiercely loyal to the organization. While preparation for Aerith's 8th birthday party were underway, Meguro had a heart attack, putting the plans on hold as the family business scrambled to cover his responsibilities. Suddenly and without warning, Zhang of the Turks arrived unannounced, and to keep her safe, Elmira had no choice but to strike a deal with him. The deal being that she would watch for any signs of Aerith's Cetra heritage in exchange for Shinra's protection and non-interference. Meguro ends up surviving his heart attack, but his deteriorating health prompts a succession crisis within the Gainsborough family business. Among underworld families, Gabriel Gainsborough was considered even-handed and fair. His organization acted as a subcontractor for construction jobs ordered by Shinra in Sector 5. He provided opportunities for upward mobility among his employees, including Meguro, who was an orphan before Gabriel took him in. Clay's enlistment and subsequent death made Meguro the most senior member of the organization. But in light of his health, rival underworld bosses such as Don Corneo of Sector 6 and the Manson crew of Sector 8 began setting their sights on Sector 5. During this tense time, when Aerith was 10, Marcellus went missing, Meguro suspecting it to be the work of kidnappers. Carlo suggested that Elmira and Aerith should take a trip to Calm until the heat died down. But the night before they set off, Aerith had a vision of an injured Marcellus near the gate in Sector 6. Aerith told Elmira, who reluctantly shared the tip with Carlo, leading to Marcellus being rescued just in the nick of time. Afterwards, Carlo started to wonder how Elmira knew where Marcellus was, and shared a rumor that Elmira could have arranged for Marcellus to be kidnapped. To defend Elmira, Aerith then revealed to Carlo that it was her vision that gave Elmira the information she needed. To alleviate the confusion, Elmira paid Meguro a visit, relinquishing her stake in the Gainsborough family business. Meguro then took Carlo on as his successor, and Elmira began taking odd jobs in the community to support herself. Once Aerith turned 13, she herself got a job as an assistant at the orphanage. All the while, and totally unbeknownst to her, Carlo led his organization in a brutal turf war against Don Corneo, who was hoping to take advantage of the succession crisis. The reason she never found out was that Shinra enforced a restricted zone around Aerith's neighborhood, preventing her from knowing anything about the fighting or getting caught up in it. When Aerith was 14, she encountered Marcellus and Ronna's entourage in Sector 5. Marcellus had come to speak to Aerith about a fever dream he had while injured by monsters during his runaway incident a few years back. He believed Aerith saved him in the dream, which led to his miraculous rescue. During this short-lived reunion, Ronna accidentally revealed the turf war and Shinra's restricted zone to Aerith, who realized that her neighborhood was just a slightly larger version of the Shinra cage she'd been living in ever since Hojo's laboratory. The headstrong Aerith then confronted Elmira about it, and they got into a fight, leading Aerith to run away from home, hoping to find the church that Ifalna had been looking for in the fateful night of their escape. As she made her way, Aerith encountered Faz at the train station. Faz had been tipped off to Aerith's location by Amber, a member of Marcellus's entourage who happened to be the same woman who helped Aerith escape on the train all those years ago. Faz had become obsessed, calling Aerith by her mother's name, Ifalna, as he dreamt of their life together. He took Aerith to the church and tried to block her escape, but Elmira arrived and knocked Faz out with a broom for a weapon. However, the hulk of a man reawakened as they attempted to leave, blocking their path. Thankfully, a Shinra sniper put him down, and in that moment, Aerith was relieved that her restricted zone had extended to all of Sector 5, despite her guardian angel being from Shinra. With her tale at an end, Aerith suggests that she and Tifa talk business, meaning talk boys. But before they can get started, they are interrupted by Cloud, forcing them to save that conversation for a later date. Picturing the past. A Shinra military trooper named Lonnie arrives in Midgar, searching for a man named Geddy Bach, who had visited there 15 years prior. He meets with a doctor named Donovan, but Donovan is unable to find Geddy's records. He does, however, find records for a Glenn Reiner, another Shinra grunt, who had been found suffering from intense Mako poisoning 15 years before. At the same time, Geddy was supposedly there. Upon returning to Shinra headquarters, the trooper discovers that Glenn is said to have died in the Wutai War just days after his return from Midgar. Lonnie finds this suspicious, as he was in no condition to serve due to the poisoning, and fears that Glenn and Geddy are somehow connected. Lonnie then locates Jack Klein, the pilot who had flown Glenn from Midgar to Midgar. Jack admits that he would hand people suffering from Mako poisoning over to the research and development team at Shinra for money. Glenn was a member of the Special Geological Survey Initiative, which had been tasked with finding large Mako reserves. Members were at a high risk of being poisoned. Glenn gave Jack money in exchange for a secret trip to Midgar, and Jack was later tasked with bringing him to the research team after he developed Mako poisoning. Lonnie shows Jack a picture of Geddy Bach, but Jack identifies the man as Glenn. Lonnie reminisces about his time with Aerith Gainsborough, who he played with as a child. Aerith was often upset with Geddy for seemingly harming her mother. In actuality, Geddy was a clerical worker who was charged with supervising the comings and goings of others. Geddy, in a conversation with Lonnie's mother, theorized that Professor Hojo was going too far with his experiments. He also mentioned the possibility of leaving his position to join the military. The next day, Lonnie seeks out Joanne Liu, a woman who had been on the transport helicopter with a supposed Glenn. Joanne is suspicious of Lonnie, so he explains that he wants to resolve a matter before his partner Sylvina Kelly gives birth to their child. When Lonnie was young, Geddy cared for him, and he would like to find him once more. During Lonnie's conversation with Joanne, a woman named Lelisa Meg begins pounding on the wall in another room. The narrator recalls an incident when he was younger, where a black-robed woman blamed Aerith's drawings for someone's death. That woman was also named Lelisa. Joanne reveals that Lelisa had gotten Mako poisoning, and despite treatment, never fully recovered. Joanne goes on to explain that she, Lelisa, and Glenn were all from the slums and enlisted in the military at the same time. The three became friends, joined by Glenn's friends Geddy, a clerical worker. Joanne and Glenn both signed up for the Special Geological Survey Initiative as surveyors. They were handed mysterious pictures of drawings of landscapes and tasked with finding their real-world counterparts. Lelisa threw a party for the two before their departure. However, worried for Glenn, Lelisa begged him not to go and confessed her romantic feelings for him. Later that night, Geddy, Glenn, and Lelisa fell very ill. Geddy began to recover when given medicine, but Glenn and Lelisa remained unstable. Geddy believed that Lelisa might have secretly drugged their food with Mako, Joanne being alright since she had not eaten with them. Geddy decided to take on Glenn's identity and go on a special Geological Survey Initiative mission in order to fulfill Glenn's dream in his place. Lilisa responded somewhat to treatment, but Glenn passed away. Glenn's family was told he died in the Wu-Tai War. Lonnie then leaves Joanne without answering any questions from her. However, Joanne seeks out Lonnie the next day and brings him to the slums. She points out two figures, Glenn and Geddy, who are both wearing black robes. She explains that many people in the slums had gone missing, yet many returned with numbered tattoos on them, including Lilisa. Lonnie tries to talk to Geddy, but Geddy doesn't recognize him. Later, Joanne tells Lonnie her new theory. Geddy had poisoned the food so that he could take on the mission himself. Lonnie reveals that Aerith drew the pictures given to the surveyors, and that President Shinra believed the landscape images to be potential Mako sources. However, Aerith grew sickly after being forced to draw. She then told Lonnie that she could no longer see places, and that Hojo had told her making up places would get people killed. To get them off her back, Lonnie instructed her to draw Midil, which she had seen in a magazine, promising they would never ask her for help again. Once Aerith was done drawing, Lonnie then passed the drawing on to Geddy, telling him it was the clearest image Aerith had ever seen. Lonnie realizes that Geddy had poisoned Glenn so that he could find the location and gain favor with President Shinra. Lonnie feels responsible, but Joanne tells him that whatever Geddy did is solely on him, and that Lonnie never gave him the map with the intention of hurting anyone. Joanne tells Lonnie about Aerith, a girl who sells flowers in Sector 8. Lonnie visits her and apologizes. Aerith feigns ignorance, but giggles and waves as Lonnie leaves. Lonnie returns home to Sylvina, finally free from guilt. And that's the complete story of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Traces of Two Pasts. What a story. I hope you liked it, and that it helped you acquire an even deeper understanding of the rich lore of Final Fantasy VII. But how about making us rich by subscribing to our Patreon? We would love to be rich. Being rich would be super nice. Or you can just subscribe to the channel for more Final Fantasy goodness. But until next time, caca!